And welcome everybody to another episode of Strife's Sanctum podcast. My name is Citizen Strife, and this week, I'm back in the Final Fantasy well. And if nothing else, I know myself some Final Fantasy. The plan today, not sure how long this one's going to be, because this is going to be a bit of a different sort of scenario. And it's going to be Final Fantasy Theatrhythm Final Bar Line. And what Theatrhythm is, despite being kind of a silly title, because, you know, that sort of thing happens a lot, though not quite as annoying as the Kingdom Hearts 2.8 something, whatever, final mix, so whatever, you know, that kind of thing. This is also interesting. But Theatrhythm ended up becoming the rhythm game franchise for Final Fantasy music. So I get to talk about Final Fantasy music today. Oh, fucking boy, I love it. And obviously my wheelhouse is the first 10 games. But, you know, I do know a little bit about other things. Because the benefit with Theatrhythm does is it has all kinds. It has anything from anything, you know, barring space issues and whatnot for whatever songs you're in for. So whatever starting point you are for Final Fantasy or literally any Kingdom or any Square Enix franchise other than Kingdom Hearts, because Kingdom Hearts has its own game that I'll talk about someday, its own rhythm game. Hooray! Square Enix knew how to fill as many songs as it possibly could and do it in a way that was interesting, but also feel somewhat like an RPG to kind of stick to their bases. I've talked before about Hatsune Miku games, and I play those a lot, and I love them. Theatrhythm was the same idea, except, hey, it's Final Fantasy music. It's Square Enix music. Let's fucking go. So, you don't need to convince me about playing it. The big selling point of this is, hey, do you like Final Fantasy? Do you like Final Fantasy music? Do you like having characters walking and talking during Final Fantasy songs? Let's do it. So that's basically what it is. All the way from back to its first game, which was only just the first 10 games. The Uematsu stuff. No, the Uematsu and Hamauzu stuff. Because thanks to Theatrhythm telling me what composers did what, I'm able to kind of expect that or experience that now. Different games and different composers and different styles, and then kind of remembering that Uematsu's final main game was 9. He was kind of in a support role in 10, and you know he did the battle themes and such, but you know, and the main themes, but it was kind of around then he was just taking a support role in video games for a while, and now, you know, 25 years later, he's semi-retired. You know, time flies when you're having fun. But really, that first game was, hey, did you like those first 10 games? Of course you did. Here's the music from those games. And the setup was pretty simple. You had to choose which song you liked, but you could also pick from a selection of party members. Not every single party member from every single game, so don't get too attached if you're missing some people. Like, say, Final Fantasy VII had the majority of the cast, but Sid and Kachi were not involved. You know, stuff like that. Final Fantasy IX, you didn't have all the characters from that. You know, you didn't have Freya and whatnot. You had the two summoners, Garnet and Eiko. I don't think you even had Steiner. You got kind of like the bells and whistles of like the most popular characters, and then maybe you'd get another one somewhere, but by and large you got the main cast, you know, the main important cast, like the top 3 or 4 characters, and then you go from there. Yuna herself gets a couple variants. Tifa gets a couple variants because they had, you know, Advent Children and whatnot, but by and large, you know, because this is filtering into this game, same rule applies. You pick what characters were kind of the big name ones, and then that's what you would get. And you would pick and select, and they would level up. You know, they would gain better stats. That would be HP, strength, spirit, agility, luck, sort of stuff like that. It's kind of it's useful, but it's kind of there just for the flavor. It's the same idea as having the Miku health bar. Don't fuck up too much and then you won't die. I don't play on Ultimate or the what equates to extreme or hard at this point too often because I'm not good enough. But their rating system for songs is 1 through 20. Same rule applies for Kingdom Hearts songs. I think what they took was the Theatrhythm model and they transplanted it into Kingdom Hearts. So it'll be a kind of an easy transition when I talk about that some other day. And but by and large, you'd play a song, and say for instance, Dancing Mad, Final Fantasy VI final boss music. Dancing Mad would be considered a battle theme because there's multiple types. So the battle theme would be the character standing on one side of the screen. Enemies would start filtering on the other side, and you would fight them. Kind of as a representation. They would be in this like weird chibi style. And I know a couple people have said that the style is kind of, not always the fun thing. It's the first thing you'll notice is they look very chibified and small. The graphics are not the selling point here, which I think is beneficial because the less they spend on graphics, the more they can just put other songs in and go that way. So you have and remember, this was made on the DS and 3DS era. So obviously it was meant for portable systems. And then they transplanted it to arcade and now to console. And thank God for it. But you'd have your characters, and for me, my party was Rydia, Ferris, Celeste, and Aerith, So they would be fighting, you would be hitting the buttons, and much like a Miku game, you'd have to hit the buttons. Theatrhythm works on a system where critical is like super rainbows is like perfect. There's another critical that isn't so perfect that it's like, you're right, almost fucking there. Then there's like good, and then bad or miss. So there's like 6 levels of things you can do, and in the battle screen, all these things would go, and depending on how fast or how slow you turn it, because you'd have the difficulty settings, I would usually have it on easy at first, then I go to normal, and very rarely, especially now when I go on hard, I find that ultimate is, I find myself having a threshold. I have a threshold for myself. I have about 7 to 8, which is about, okay, I can kind of handle this, but I need special items to kind of give me a crutch because it's way too fucking fast. And depending on the songs, they would kind of mix and match depending on things. You would have simple strike attacks, which are the red ones. So red orbs designate you just hit it once, right where it lands, and you'd hit the rhythm. If you have a green one, it's usually a flowing, moving path. And the nice thing about battle sequences is it just moves. It moves in a straight line. You don't have to worry too much about that one. So, you'd have 4 people, 4 characters, and then you'd have the 4 little things going. You'd also have yellow, which would denote, directional buttons. So you do directional buttons, then you do, simple strikes. Cool thing, and I don't remember if this was the case in the 3DS version, but you could use any button, any face button for those strikes and those holds, and then use the directional pad, and sometimes with the higher difficulties, you would mix and match those. You'd have starts and stops. You'd have a hold one button, and then you would go again. What gets me, especially now, is trying to I'm trying to hold a button, and then I'm trying to stick with the rhythm, and I'm doing strike with a second button. That's where the difficulty starts coming in with this system, is trying to hold a button at bay, trying to do it. Because in Miku, you had macros where you could hold 2 buttons at once with a single button, or even 3 or 4. I don't think that's the case with this one. So it's a little more wonky because you have to manage. You hold a button. You got to do multiple directions and a button. You got to do other things. And God forbid what some of the ultimates are. Some of the people who know this game in and out, I'm admittedly a scrub. I only know what I know from experiencing some games. And they mix and match the difficulties. Sometimes I might find a certain song that is easier than others, even at the same level. They could be a 7 or an 8 or a 10 and be like, I can't do this. One I remember having so much trouble with was Triple Triad Shuffle and Boogie, or Shuffle or Boogie from Final Fantasy VIII. For some reason, I get to, and I deal with this in Taiko as well, I get to about normal, or I get to maybe ultimate, or extreme, or whatever they call it. And I get it, but then the next step up is just untenable. My brain and my fingers can't move fast enough. So I have to slide myself back and say, all right, this is where I'm at. I don't think there's a song yet that I've experienced, and I said this when I played Miku before. There are several difficulties or songs in Miku where the older I get and the worse that my wrist issues get or my fingers get, I physically cannot play a song at a certain difficulty. So I'm aware, okay, this is not something I want to be doing. So there's that involved. I have not had that in Theatrhythm. More for me, it's, I know I'm not going to beat this, so I'm not even going to try. It's a fun, cool thing at the end of the stream to try a harder difficulty, but by and large, that, like, battle themes are set stronger than field themes. But you deal with the battles, and as you hit each button, what's going to happen is that each character is going to strike, and they're going to attack the enemy on screen. They could use status effects, they can use damage attacks, so you see this like mock battle kind of play out, and the more damage you do and the higher levels you are, the easier it is to hit the enemy, and you'll get an extra item and whatever, because more enemies get beaten than you fight a boss enemy. And more times than not, though not always, the bosses are going to be the bosses you would face in the game. So in Dancing Mad's case, you'd face Kefka. I remember what was kind of funny was the Blitzball theme. So you'd listen to the Blitzball theme, and then you'd fight the boss, and it would be Ozma from Final Fantasy IX, because Ozma is a floating ball. I thought that was just a neat touch. You don't have a Blitzball, but you got Ozma. It's nice. So whoever made this game gets points simply because they are smart enough to see, okay, what do we have here? We don't want to use Jekt in this spot. That would also fit in a way, but having this giant Braska's Aeon thing in the middle of it would be kind of weird. So let's just have Ozma instead. He's a fucking Blitzball. Ozma is the Blitzball. I'm never going to forget it. So the battle thing, you fight the monsters, you survive it. The idea with the rhythm game is you only fail if your health bar goes completely shot. They'll give you some potions and high potions and Phoenix Downs that'll heal you. Characters themselves also get some character buffs and skills to use. They can range from you attack after a certain amount of combos, you attack after the certain enemy, so some strike the second enemy in the line, some attack the boss enemy. Cloud of Darkness, for instance, does her finishing move in Final Fantasy III, and Dissidia right as a boss enemy attacks. There's one where if you're lacking in healing, then a certain character can just do a massive heal. There's another one where it's a tick heal, like a regen, as the song goes. Those are my favorite. You regen because you on the harder difficulties, you just get your ass handed to you and you're missing notes left and right and you need to heal. And that's kind of slow but steady benefit, especially if you hit an easy patch because not every song is just going to be relentless. Sometimes a song might be a little slow and it'll be like, okay, I can kind of handle this part, but I can't handle the heavy shit. Those are things you have to gauge when if you're really keyed into each song and you do it, then you can kind of guess, okay, this song is good for this thing, but I've got this thing, this person, and you could like have a preferred party, or you could do, willy-nilly, I just want to use every single character because I've got hundreds to choose from and it doesn't fucking matter, I have favorites. My method, and I've said this in out of other videos and stuff when I'm on YouTube videos and stuff, was I prefer female avatars, and simply mostly because they don't get a lot of lead time and like main character status and shit like that. But I've ever since Persona, I've always gravitated towards that. It could be the social link thing. It could be the fact that they just, whatever it is. So my thought process in Final Barline was, okay, you're going to give me like 100 different characters to choose from. So what if I choose females only? And I ended up with, sets of characters from the games that I was able to fill. So I was like, okay, I got Yuna in here. I've got Tifa, Garnet, Ferris in there. Some people I would have wanted, like Quistis, but she's not available. Boo. Stuff like that. Renault is in there. So mostly that 4 through 10. I've said before, 4 through 10 is my jam. So that's my frame of reference. But if you want Final Fantasy 11 characters, boom. You've got Final Fantasy 11. Final Barline goes all the way to Final Fantasy 16. And I don't know if they include Clive in those characters, but they at least include the songs as DLC. Because this came out last year around Valentine's Day. So they were able to get up to Final Fantasy VII Remake and even Strangers of Paradise music. And then they added in Final Fantasy 16 because that came out about a season later. I don't think they included Clive, unfortunately, but they got like 4 or 5 songs from 16. They don't have Rebirth, unfortunately. That would have been fun because they had so much more in Rebirth, and I haven't really talked at length about the remake Rebirth stuff, but there'll be a day for that. But suffice it to say, all those go through it, and you just have characters from anything, do anything, pick anything, and they have their skill set. They have their uses. Some people are better at HP. Some people are better at magic. Some people are better at healing people. Stuff like that. But if you do the battles, then you have a second idea called field. So field ones, this one is more a single straight line, single straight route. But instead of holding the button and just staying in a single elevation, what it'll do is it'll kind of bounce up and down like a music scale kind of thing, and you have to hold it. And there was a glitch in early Final Barline. I don't know if this is still true, but I do it anyway. Is I kind of hold the button to the left, so I hold the directional button to the left to kind of hold it and lock it, and then I pull up and down on the other stick to stay in line with where it's bouncing. And that seems to eliminate the glitch where I would be missing a lot of this was very, very early in Final Barline, like first day patch sort of situation. I don't know why it would happen, but it would, so I found a way around it. And fields are technically easier than battles, which is kind of nice. But the cool thing about fields is you actually have like little airships that you can kind of jump off of. So you got the lunar whale, the Final Fantasy airship, the Ragnarok, the fancy schmancy ones, and you can kind of jump off it at the beginning. You hear the song going, and then the field, much like the battles, would try to mimic the areas that you're going to. If it's not a one-to-one scenario, sometimes they'll do a color scheme. So the North Cave in Final Fantasy VII, the final dungeon there, if it doesn't look exactly like the same cave, what they can do is color code it to what the cave would look like or what the game would look like. And Final Fantasy VII had that kind of like bright green, bluish tint to it. So their way around doing it was having the cave motif, but having you in the green one. So they, at least try to fit. And I give them a lot of credit, because you still have to remember there's like 400 to 500 songs that you have to code for. You had to kind of painstakingly get which characters and which enemies were there, but then which environment makes the most sense. Battles were a little bit more sophisticated, because it would be like, okay, this looks like it. And I would say for DLC, let's say Chrono Trigger, Lavos Battle, the second Lavos Battle, the Doors of Doom open, the alien looking one before the final boss, the giant one. They actually had him in his like super giant, big armed, big boob form, right? And the song would play as you'd be watching Lavos fight. You know, that's an interesting kind of look. You'd have the end of time where it actually you're at the end of time, or the like the shuffle and boogie from Final Fantasy VIII. You'd actually be on the triple triad board. You know, it would it would be kind of like slanted to the ground, but it's the triple triad board. It's kind of neat, and they do that, right? So they give you as much as possible for these environments, even in their low poly form, to at least hit the ambiance of what they're going for. And it's especially cool when you notice, you know, the differences in the Final Fantasy 1 to Final Fantasy 3, you know, the NES era, Final Fantasy 4 to Final Fantasy 6, the SNES, you know, PS1, all the way up to now. The subtle changes in how the songs feel, how the songs, and I will guarantee you the difference in song quality up until around PS2 to PS3 is just striking. I don't think it's as noticeable now. Most of this stuff is just louder, but music and sound chips and stuff, and I don't know the technical stuff for that. All I know is that you had MIDIs and other stuff way back when. Somebody who knows how video game sound chips and stuff like that would work would probably be able to tell me a little bit more, but it's just like, even in Final Fantasy 3, like, you didn't even have drums until then. You had to kind of make like a small drum beat kind of thing in a MIDI sound effect. You get to Final Fantasy 4, you get like a little darker feel. Final Fantasy 5 is a little brighter. Final Fantasy 6 is kind of a mix of both. 7 uses MIDIs. Final Fantasy 8, it's almost orchestral at that point, and then Final Fantasy 9 is great. Final Fantasy 10 uses kind of a mix of techno and softer instrumentation, but when it needs to get heavy, you'd have the Otherworld song happen, and you'd be like, oh my god, metal in the Final Fantasy game, awesome. But then you'd remember Battle of the Big Bridge came out first, but it wasn't a metal song until then. The X-Death theme, which is not in this, but the X-Death theme was also metal too. So there were little tinges in that early Final Fantasy era where I was like, oh, metal in a Final Fantasy game? Fuck yes, give me that. But you would hear these tendencies in all of these things, and you would start picking apart, okay, this person prefers doing this, and then you hear this character or this composer, you know, doing 10 and 13, you know, Hama Uzu, right? And you'd start picking up, okay, this tends to sound like this, or this person would do this, you know, cool shit like that. But getting back to the fields, so the bouncing green thing over, up, and down, you'd have the sliding enemies come back in over and over again still, but not to the same extent as the battles. The battles, it's just all the enemies show up all at once. You'd have a little bit of a lull in there. Another thing you'd have in the fields is a support mascot. I don't think they do anything special, but you'd have a Moogle that you can dress up in a little bit of an outfit. You'd have a Tonberry or a Cactuar, I think, that you can, you know, I know for sure the Moogle can wear a Tonberry like hat or something, but it's a support Moogle just to have the Moogle, just because Moogles are fun. The other final type of song is very, very unique. It's an FMV. I forget the specific name of it. They aren't something I do all the time, so forgive me on that one. But you would have an FMV of sequences from each game. So Final Fantasy 1, you would get the opening stuff, you do the other thing, you get all the other stuff going around. But you'd be playing over top like a Guitar Hero, forward and top, you know, towards the top of the screen, the stuff would come down towards you. So the Guitar Hero method. And it changes things up because it's going from the horizontal down to the vertical. So you get kind of best of both worlds. And these FMVs are pretty neat. My favorite was Hollow from Final Fantasy VII Remake, because you get to see the sequences of Final Fantasy VII Remake, play themselves out. But again, you get like little snippets. So that's something you do have to avoid, is if you haven't played these games, you might get spoiled. In fact, by and large, you will get. Especially for Final Fantasy IV, Final Fantasy V, Final Fantasy VII, you're gonna get spoiled. Final Fantasy VI, I think, does like World of Ruin stuff, but by and large, it's something to be aware of. Like, you may not know the context, but you'll still see parts of the sequences or kind of the aftermath. You will at least see the aftermath of what happens in the games. So that is something to be aware of if you've never played them. The FMVs do kind of spoil. I mean, they spoil the thing. They spoiled that Final Fantasy VII thing. If you haven't heard it in 25 fucking years, you'll hear about it. I love how that's still considered a spoiler. I mean, at least with Final Fantasy V, we have some plausible deniability, but Final Fantasy VII, everybody knows what it is, and yet it's still considered a fucking spoiler. Anyway, I'm off track because I'm not following a script this week. So whatever. Just be aware, if you do the FMV sequences, you're gonna see footage. You're gonna see like what the battles look like. You're gonna see what the game looked like. You're gonna see what the characters and all that shit, the enemies. But you will, especially once Final Fantasy VII rolls around, see the FMVs, and you might get spoiled. And by and large, you will be. And that, it doesn't bother me because I've played almost all of them, and even with some of the spin-offs, I don't really give a shit, or some of the later Final Fantasy games where I just don't really care much. I'm kind of like, it's fine. I know what the story beats are. I'm not going to be spoiled. So that is something to be aware of if you're using Final Fantasy Theatrhythm as your lead into Final Fantasy, because, if you're a rhythm game fan, have never played, Final Fantasy, is the music good? Well, I mean, yeah, very fucking good. I'm not saying every song on here is a fucking banger, but it is. But those FMV sequences are there. I will say that Theatrhythm Final Barline tries to focus in on like, hey, people can play together and do the thing. So if you want to do like online co-op and, do, battle sequence thing, that stuff, I don't care. I really do not give a fuck. I'm not a co-op person, but if you are, they do have co-ops. You got little cards you can collect, and you can collect artwork and little things and stuff. You can do that. The way you unlock songs is going through quest lines. Especially early in the demo, when we got that, you'd actually have about 5 or 10 songs of a certain thing. Say Final Fantasy IV. You got Final Fantasy IV, you did the Red Wings theme, you did, Theme of Love, which is Rosa's theme, a couple of the battle themes in a line, and you would have them be unlocked as you go. And then you would unlock the entire thing after you beat that segment. So you'd have like 5 or 6 stages, sometimes 10 if it was like something long, like Final Fantasy 14 or something. Again, not disparaging this thing. Final Fantasy 14 is just not my thing. But Final Fantasy 14 has a shit ton of songs in it. So yeah, if that's what you're coming from, play that one because you're more familiar with a certain, song set list, and then you go through it and you unlock it, and then you get a key that lets you unlock others. Of course, for me, I went through 1 through 10 because that is my wheelhouse. But then you'd unlock and go through that. And once you unlock them, you can even do DLC. You could buy DLC from older Theatrhythm games, which had access to some of the Mana songs, some of the Chrono Trigger or Chrono Cross songs, near, the Hills of Radiant Winds, or the amusement park, the song, the boss battle theme in the fucking. It's weird. I remember that being such a big freaking set piece, but that amusement park in Nier Automata takes like 20 minutes. It's kind of crazy when you think about how much that is like remembered, and yet that sequence is like 20 minutes long. It's weird, if that. But that shows you how powerful music can be. If you have a set vision and you have a thing, it's like the opera scene in Final Fantasy VI. That's mine. That opera scene is about 10 to 15 minutes, but I was floored by it. seeing Jet for the first time, and he comes up off the ground and he's playing the fucking over the other world theme, and that's your final boss theme until they cop out and then they do something worse. Shit like that. And I'm like, oh shit, it's getting real. Music is universal. It's fun. And it doesn't, again, I state that I don't care about most other composers or most other themes, but you can learn. Like, okay, this style of music is more my jam. Like, I'm not into the Final Fantasy 1 or 10, but I started in Final Fantasy 11 or 14 or Final Fantasy 16, so I know this composer. Let me listen to the stuff that came before it, or let me listen to only the stuff that I care about. You can kind of pick and choose. You get 400 to 500 songs, whether you pay for it or not. It is an extensive DLC, and you don't have to, but to get the full width and breadth of all of the Square Enix and Final Fantasy stuff that's available, spending money to do it is worth it. And no, you can't have every character and you can't have every song, but the level of detail they're going into to give you as much as they can is striking. This was like one of the front runners for like Game of the Year for a little bit of time, because they just gave you so much in this package. You get characters more than enough that you need. You get almost all the Final Fantasy games more than enough that you need. I mean, I don't think they're going to anymore, but like the Rebirth and then the next game after that, like if they wanted to, they could just keep adding DLC to this game and keep going. But if they wanted to, 5 or 10 years down the road, say, hey, we're going to do Final Bar Line 2, I would have no problem with it. A PlayStation 6 or Switch 2 or something like that. I have no trouble with that. This is as definitive a set of Final Fantasy music as you can get, without just going on YouTube and listening to the fucking playlist for like 10 to 20 hours. And you learn about different composers and what they did. Stuff like Yoko Shimomura going from freaking Kingdom Hearts doing Final Fantasy 15. I knew she was in it, but I'm like, okay, I only know about 2 or 3 songs in there, but it's like, okay, well, maybe I missed a good song that I forgot about, or here's a song from this game I don't know about, or Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, weird game for babies, but the music is fucking fantastic, for what little that game did offer, it offered great music, shit like that, and I could just get absorbed in hours of playing this game, and sure as hell I was when it first came out. I still will find myself playing it every couple of weeks, because I stream it, or I'm doing other things, or I'm watching somebody play it, because you're always coming back to it. Music is such an easy thing to just come back to and be like, I want to listen to this song again. And you can put it on YouTube, or you can play it on here, and you're not going to be disappointed. And the game part is sufficient. You get to see a world of Final Fantasy in a different way, because Final Fantasy is a brand now, but giving you that access to music, in a form is kind of neat. And having people who are like me growing up with a franchise, or people who've come into it for the first time, music is a powerful tool. And if it's one song that gets you into it, if it gets you hooked into it, I mean, that could be a good thing. Like, you never know what's going to hook you into enjoying a thing. So even if it's not my thing, I'm not going to disparage anybody to find something that they like, a franchise, a song, a musician, whatever. If you're attracted to something for some reason and you love that thing, that is something that defines who you are. And Final Fantasy, for better or for worse, what I think about it now these days, is defined a lot of the stuff that I've done in my life. And I'm grateful that, because this was one of those games that, much like the Xenosaga remaster that they're never going to do, but they might someday, this is that, like, break in case of glass sort of situation. Because this was just on the DS and 3DS forever. Now you have it on a console. It's a much easier access point to this sort of stuff. So if you're into it because of one specific game, if you're into it because of a set of games or a composer, you're likely to find it in here. You get access to games you never even thought of. Some of the old school stuff that you would be like, okay, this was on the Game Boy? This was on the what? Shit like that. You're not going to be disappointed. So would I recommend Theatrhythm Final Barline? Absolutely. As I said before, if anything is an easy access point and a universal access point, it's music. Music drives us in a way that not a lot of things do, but it can open people's minds. It can open people's hearts. I know that sounds fucking cheesy, but it's true. Music moves people in a way that few things do. So having access to all of this is a striking thing. And yeah, you might pay a pretty penny for it, but you're getting access to 35 years of music. So I give them credit for giving players as much as they could, for whatever they needed to charge for it, because it's a franchise that should have gotten on console sooner, but I'm glad that they finally did. But anyway, that'll do for this week's episode. And let's see what's next. We've got fishing minigames and JRPGs. I'm working my way through that right now. I'm, going through Reddit, game guides, YouTube, trying to finish that up. Again, it's not going to be full encompassing every minigame ever, and there's going to be some things I just don't know, but I'm going to try my best. Got Speed Grapher, Link's Awakening, Kemono Jihen, the Somnium Files, Sailor Moon Crystal with Lee, Persona 3 Reload, and now I've added Assassination Classroom, which I gotta say, I watched it over the last couple of weeks, and hot damn, the show was good. It started good, it ended good, and it had one of the best episodes I'd ever seen in my life. Just straight, what is a good, great episode that moves you? The second to last episode in that show is just fantastic, and almost elevated it purely by its existence. But Assassination Classroom was a show I hadn't gotten to for a decade, and I'm kind of glad I got to it because I would have forgotten it was there. And I feel dumb for having waited that long. So I'll talk about that coming into August. But we're still at the end of May, so I've got a lot of other stuff to do. But speaking of stuff to do, I have to get ready for work. So I'll see you guys next time. Citizen Strife, signing off.